everyone, and welcome. Thanks for waiting. We're excited to get started here today. I'm Rebecca, and I'm the Communications Wizard here at Round Sky. So thanks for joining our introductory webinar on how to stay connected, engaged, and human in remote collaboration. And I just want to start with saying that we have leaders on this call from all over the US, some people from across the globe, and that's pretty incredible to have this ability to connect here today on this important topic as we're having this global experience. And some of you work at cooperatives, nonprofits, conscious businesses, collectives, and maybe in the teal world. So welcome. We have a pretty diverse crowd here in terms of space and work, and we've all come together to get a little bit deeper into what it takes for really human-centered virtual facilitation. So I'm glad to have you here, and you're in the right space if you're craving a space to connect on functional and efficient, but also human remote collaboration. So you're in the right place. And I'm excited to discuss to get a little bit deeper on what's coming up for you in this global crisis. And we'll be offering some tools on that and how to make sense of it in some ways with your team. And we'll be pulling from what we know best, which is our remote cooperative leadership certification program. So we'll be kind of highlighting some of the tools we teach our students. And you'll have some next actions after this call to try out for yourself. And so many of you know us, but for those who are new to Round Sky, I want to share just 3 quick things before we really get in it. So the first thing is that Round Sky is a remotely operated worker-owned co-op, meaning we're a business where the workers run it together and own it together. And we work with all types of leaders, aspiring leaders, and organizations that value and want to improve their democratic and participatory processes online and in person. And the second thing is that we offer sessions like this, excuse me, pretty often and in personal and professional development. So we've had free webinars and challenges on strategic planning, confident leadership, decision-making, and those types of things. So if you've tried those out, awesome. If not, we have a lot of these resources on our website still, so you can check out our archive. And lastly, the third thing is that we put a lot of work into our main strategic initiative, the Cooperative Leadership Certification Program that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And we've worked really hard to get at what today's leaders really need to succeed in a remote setting, the tools, the skills, and nuance. So you can consider that for yourself. And we have applications due next Thursday on April 9th. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. So now I want to move to logistics about this webinar for people who are new or fairly new to Zoom, since a lot of people have been getting on Zoom these days. So if you want to ask a question or answer our questions, you can do that in the chat box. And you can go to all attendees, which will go to everyone. You can also private chat people if you'd like. If you have any technical questions, you can ask me, and you can see Cecile just popped in and said hello. You should have an alert on your toolbar. You may need to wiggle your mouse around to find it. It pops up. And we'll take clarifying questions as needed throughout the session, and we'll leave a lot of time for questions at the end. So if you have questions, we're here to kind of unpack some of those things. And the session is being recorded and will be shared with you along with the resources that we mentioned today after the meeting. And in general, we'll keep everyone on mute. Thanks for doing that already. And lastly, we only have a short time together today to go over the material. We've set aside an hour and 15 minutes to be exact, a little bit longer than we usually do. And you may leave with questions, which is good. You can email us if you have some, and we can keep this moving together. So it's not the end of the call isn't the door shut. So now I want to give us space to get to know who's on the call. So first off, you can use that chat box and tell us your name, maybe something you're currently feeling challenged with in your remote work, and your favorite or most used conference call bingo moment, which you can see these little bingo things, meme that's been going around. So if you could share that in the chat box, kind of lighten the heaviness. And I'll start to kind of show you all what to expect. So I'm Rebecca, like I said. I currently live and have been in New Orleans for 6 years. I'm originally from California. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today because I've been working remotely with Round Sky for almost 4 years now in July. And I've learned a lot about myself and collaboration at Round Sky. And I'm sure you can relate that when collaboration is not working, it's super uncomfortable and overwhelming to figure out how to move forward with some of the teams that I've been a part of in the past. And when we're working remotely, the ability to align is even more challenging without having that face-to-face, without the right tools. So I'm excited to share these things with you today. And my favorite bingo moment is the sound of someone typing, possibly with a hammer, because I think that's often what people experience with me. So I will now pass it to Cecile to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. So I'm Cecile Green. I'm one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions. And I've been a social entrepreneur for over 30 years. A practical handbook for a generative world as at work, and offers a synthesis of over a dozen different collaborative methodologies and as our world is navigated uncharted waters, I'm delighted to be offering what we've learned and practiced with virtual teams for the last 8 years, so that your transition can be smoother and less painful than what I experienced back about. So my favorite conference call bingo is, wait, I think you're on mute. And that's certainly because often that's me. And I'll pass it to Daniel.
We heard most of that, Cecile, but you had your own bingo moment there of being a little choppy, but I think we got most of it. And off to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Cecile. Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel Little. I'm also based in northern Vermont in the United States. I'm also a co-founder of Round Sky, a master integral coach, and one of the instructors here at Round Sky. My passion is really helping people learn and grow and heal with somatic approaches to mindfulness and capacity building. On a personal level, I really love to dance and spend time in nature, and that's one of the blessings of living in a beautiful rural place like Vermont. Is even though we're kind of on lockdown, I can still get out in the hills and do exercise. You know, and we can still get out for exercise, and it's really been very resourceful for me. And I love to bring the perspective of connection to our bodies and connection to each other and to the world into my work with groups. I've been doing a substantial part of my work online for the last nearly a decade, both with Round Sky and a couple of startups I was working for prior to that. And I'm looking forward to bringing some of that experience to our current world situation and in support of all the changes we're all making so rapidly these days. My favorite conference call bingo moment is, I think there's a lag. Thanks.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that, and thanks everyone for answering. I noticed someone added one about their cat jumping in. That should be added to the conference call bingo. If it's not, I don't see it. But we're gonna keep this moving to get a collective picture about what's coming up for you and your team. So I'm gonna share a whiteboard, and if you haven't done this before, Cecile's gonna walk us through it. And before she does that, I just wanna give you the prompt so you can mull it over for a few seconds about what's coming up for you and your team during this uncertain and chaotic time. Like, what are some of the feelings, the thoughts? And you can doodle this or share it in one to 5 words or more. So you should see a whiteboard now, and Cecile will walk us through.
Yay, all right. There's the whiteboard. So in order to be able to write on the whiteboard, you might want to take your mouse and scroll it across the top of the screen where you see a big green bar and a big small black bar that says View Options. If you click on the down arrow next to View Options, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, you'll see a note that says Annotate. And if you click Annotate, a secondary bar pops up. You'll need to choose text, or if you want to draw, you can draw, but the text enables you then to put your cursor on the screen, and then you can add something to the doc in answer to, yes, wonderful. I see little hearts showing up. That's perfect.
That is great. So hearts, maybe your team is feeling extra love in this moment from each other or from your community. There's a lot of mutual aid happening in different areas. It's a lot is happening here in New Orleans. Innovative and agile. You don't really have much choice in this moment. You have to be innovative, right? Okay. Yeah. Privilege, yes. Having the time to take this call today is possibly one. Adjusting and trying to figure out what of our in-person training works to continue online. Caring and capable of solving our many collective crises. Yes. I'll add one here. And a different, you can change the color too if you want. I'll put mine in green. Some stress. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that. Anxious, stressed, and also connected, resilient, isolated, shifted, learning technology. If you're having trouble connecting on the whiteboard right now, go ahead and just message it either privately to me and I'll put it on here, or to the group. And I'll make sure it goes on here. So much screen time. Adjusting that has been a challenge, absolutely. There's some check marks on some of these things. Strangely isolated, connected at once. If you can't access the whiteboard, try wiggling your mouse again to the top, and there should be that view settings and then annotate. Click around to there. And if not, you can chat it and I'll add it. So there's some hearts, some check marks. Awesome. Affinity groups. If you want to expand on any of this in the chat box, please do. I'm going to close it. Lots of hearts. That's great. Nice. All right. So I'm going to stop my share here. I'm going to switch it actually to not create confusion. Thank you for that. So there's a lot of different things happening with us. We're feeling connected but isolated. We're feeling stressed but supported and loved. It's a very human time in lots of ways. So I want to pass it to Cecile to get into some of the overview of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, everyone. It's grounding to hear that the experiences we're having we're not alone in those experiences, even though we may be in our own little houses with our own little screens. But some of our experiences are very common across. And just noticing the chat box, many of the issues that folks are raising, we're hoping to directly address in this webinar for you all. We've packed it full today. So just want to remind you all that if something isn't landing for you, don't worry, you're going to get a recording, you're going to get resources afterwards. So, but we really wanted to share with you some of the key things that we found make the biggest difference for teams. So obviously business as usual is not going to happen right now, but we can see this as an opportunity to build the spaces that we dream of as social entrepreneurs, as nonprofit runners, but we have to be able to visibilize that. We have to be able to coordinate across our teams to bring that about. And so in this call, we're going to start with the power of somatics and getting grounded and aligned even across remote spaces. And in fact, across remote spaces, this practice can be especially essential. Secondly, we're going to dive into how to make your virtual meetings human-centered yet efficient and effective. And then we'll dive into some tactics for reprioritizing and connecting on the concrete work. With the advent of COVID-19, most of us, if not all of us, have had to revisit what our strategic priorities are right now for ourselves. And so we're going to offer you some tools for doing that as a team. And on that note, I'm going to pass it to Daniel to offer the first tool on somatics.
You're on mute, Daniel. Bingo.
Bingo moment. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so actually I wanted to start with just a little guided somatic check-in for ourselves right now. Grounding in our body could be a good way to get present and quiet our minds as we meet here together. So I'll offer some suggestions of what to pay attention to in your bodily experience for a couple minutes. But feel free to do this in your own way. Adapt to what's good for you. Maybe you have your own way of kind of centering your body, and that's fine. I'll just offer some suggestions here. So if you like, you can close your eyes or soften your gaze. And I really like to feel the effects of gravity when I'm sensing it in my body, like feeling where your body meets the floor or the place where you're sitting. Perhaps your feet are on the floor, your back against a chair. Really noticing the feeling of contact in yourself as gravity pulls you into the floor or into your seat. And then from there, like letting your attention drop down and just focusing in your feet themselves. Feeling into your feet from the inside. Really inhabiting the space of your feet as they touch the floor. And you can imagine breathing into your feet, like breathing just with your feet, in your feet, as your feet, for a few breaths. And from there, perhaps allowing your attention to spread to other parts of your body, kind of rising up, scanning what's present for you. But I would like to invite us to particularly look for places inside that feel good, feel healthy, whole, relaxed, or even just neutral, even just a kind of okay. With so much stress and change, just find the places that just even feel just okay can be a resource. We often tend to focus on the discomfort, but it's super helpful to look for the places that can be a support to us. So I'm sensing into my body now, there's like this kind of like throbbing, like in my arms a bit, that feels good in a way, some kind of like strength or something. What is it for you? And as you breathe into those places in your body, just letting that feeling expand and noticing other places that might feel solid or resourceful or helpful within your own experience. And just breathing with that for a moment. And then, in a moment now, you can open your eyes, or if you've closed them, and but don't pay attention so much to the computer or the screen or anything just for right away. Just kind of looking around the space you're in, and just noticing what's here. Where are you? Where are you? We're both here together on this conference system, but we're also each in our own space, wherever that is. What's around you? How does it feel to be in that space? Can you bring some of the grounding you perhaps were able to feel in your body into the space, into the environment that you're in, so that you feel supported and resourced just by being okay within the space, just being, here I am. And then as you're ready, just bringing your attention back to this conference that we're in, this webinar, this online remote learning, sharing experience. And and sensing, even though we, perhaps even, scrolling through some of the icons of the photos of the other people, like, who's here? We're here together. We're here together, like trying to make a better world in the midst of a crazy crisis, and to take advantage of this opportunity to learn and to grow and bring more resourcefulness to ourselves and to our communities. And just a curiosity, what do you sense? What do you sense as you feel that we're here together? I just want to invite us each now just for a moment of reflection. As I notice, like for myself, a little bit of a warmth, in my heart, and a little like choked up in my throat, just a little bit like sensing that we're all here together. What's that for you? If you like, just take 30 seconds and reflect on that, on what you noticed in your own experience, what you're noticing now, and perhaps write that down or share it with us in the chat box. We'll just take another few seconds of silence and then move into the next bit. Yeah, exactly. Margaret said, I need to slow the anxiety, something like that. And I feel that too, being here on the call, is a, little stage fright element of just being on point, here on the call. It brings up a certain level of anxiety, and it's great to slow down. Okay, great. So I can encourage you to, add your reflections, if you have any, to the chat box if you like, or jot them down for yourself. And I'm going to talk a little more now about this first tool of getting connected to your body. We call it somatics because that word just basically means like our own inner awareness of our body. It's not like a scientific biological exterior view. It's like, what's our own view of our own experience from inside? And just like we did a moment ago, we were doing a little somatic awareness practice. And these awareness practices build our own personal coherence and our feeling of being resourced, and enable us to facilitate greater group coherence, and then leading to a more grounded team. And in times like this, which are so ungrounding, we can look to this tool, to just being in our bodies, to build a bit more capacity. Tapping our somatic awareness over time can be particularly helpful for a team because we can improve how we sense our capacities, and we can sense what our needs are, what we need to ask for or offer, what we have to offer or what we need to ask for. We sense that in our own experience internally, in a sense. Yeah. And we've included this simple tool because so often our remote teams forget about the physical body. Like and it's all the more important to bring this grounding practice to our remote work, for yourself and for your meetings with teams, since we don't have that casual in-person physical presence to remind us that we're not just little talking heads on a screen. We're whole beings, bringing our whole self to our engagement, even though it's through this medium. And generally, our bodies are a vast resource that's largely ignored in our culture. And when we reverse that trend over time and through practice, our facilitators notice their capacity to navigate difficult, tense, and uncertain situations with more capacity, resulting in stronger engagement and alignment, and really a connection to our humanity. We've included this approach as a project in our Cooperative Leadership Certification Program because it's a valuable facilitation resource to rely on your body. When somatics are tapped into, it brings a groundedness that can be felt by the whole team. Somatic mindfulness helps us tap our resourcefulness even if we feel scattered or anxious or uncertain. Somatic awareness builds increased emotional intelligence. We increase our ability to bring forward what's important to each situation. For example, when things get hot in a conversation, we're better able to listen and respond appropriately rather than get sucked in and react. And we can sense when there's a tension in the room, even in the virtual room, in a sense, that's not been resolved, and it gives us a direction on where to go next. One of our students, Carolyn, found that focusing on her personal development around a somatic practice enabled her to, quote, stop undermining myself, or at least do it a lot less, and start doing the hard things that I need to move my work in this world forward. And again, all this is especially critical in the midst of this pandemic. All of us are having to navigate a lot of increased uncertainty and stress. And before this is all over, many of us, or if not most of us are going to have to face even more intense hardships of losing employment or businesses or sickness or grief and loss for ourselves or for people close to us. And all of this remote work that many of us are being called to do, while it keeps us safer and contributes to flattening the curve of infections, also isolates us from the hugs and other forms of supportive physical presence that we normally rely on to get us through the hard stuff in life. One thing in the midst of all this that we can do is, in our own sphere of action, practice inhabiting our bodies with greater somatic mindfulness. We can approach ourselves from the inside with increasing care and compassion and bring that greater resourcefulness and capacity to all that we do in our lives and to the communities we're a part of. Yeah, so that's point number one that we really want to make, that tool of somatic awareness.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Daniel. And we all have that capability. Like, all you need is your body, which is kind of amazing. So I just want to, I'll be providing like a quick summary of each thing just to kind of support people and focusing in, especially with these things that are more complex as we go. And so start a regular practice of checking in with your body. Utilize this in your team when you're feeling stuck, to get present. Maybe your team's feeling the anxiousness, like people mentioned earlier in the check-in, in the whiteboard check-in. This is a great tool to use on a team basis, not just individual. And it can be helpful to have an accountability practice set up, because as you do this day after day, you find new things and new capacity within your body. So I encourage you to find a community of practice to make this happen, whether it's just a few people. Our course has this, like we said, but find something that works for you. And with that, we're gonna pass it to Cecile for the next tool.
Yeah, so a perfect segue in a way, our capacity and to sense what's going on for us in our bodies really leads us into an increased capacity to do tension-driven meetings, which we're about to explain to you, but they build on each other. And so we've built some of these connecting somatic moments into our remote and in-person collaborative meeting practices because they are so helpful in such a wide range of situations. One of the things we've found in our research and in our work with clients is that meetings are a core place where dysfunction, disconnection, and lack of alignment can be amplified. There's a good reason why people hate meetings. And however, meetings can also be a place for connection, moving work forward meaningfully, and engaging with each other, humanizing each other, showing up for each other in times of crisis. So we've designed an optimal flow, which you can see here on the screen. We only have time today to focus on one part of this flow, but we'll be sending this out as part of the email. Feel free to make use of this standard meeting practice, and we'll we'll be going into that specific detail in a minute. But our cooperative leadership program dives deeply into each of these sections, and students get a chance to practice facilitating each piece while getting feedback from instructors. If facilitation, both remote and in person, is on your list of things you want to improve and strengthen, then this course is a great place to get that concrete improvement and tools for facilitating collaborative management. So today I'm sharing this tactic called tension-driven meetings. It's a practice I learned from Holacracy. Has anyone heard of a tension-driven agenda? Please tell us in the chat box if you have. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to start by sharing a big picture about what are we talking about before diving into the specifics of how this functions. The tools we teach our clients and in our courses are based on a number of principles. And one of those principles from ecology is waste equals food. Essentially here, healthy ecosystems, there is no waste. Everything is reconsumed by another creature. And when we think of our human social ecosystems, we can see that we're very good at noticing what's missing, what's broken, what's wrong in a situation, And most organizations, this shows up as complaining or negativity or swamp talk, and so it's discouraged. Then all that important information gets turned into waste, and that waste is swept behind doors or under rugs, and it starts to stink. Instead, in our courses and with our clients, we use this ability to notice what's needed by making explicit room for our tensions. In other words, we're interested in our ability to notice what could be better or what's in the way of doing a great job. These tensions are then properly composted through the meeting process to produce food. In other words, improvements for the organization. What was complaining now has a place in our processes to be listened to and processed into more efficient and effective organization. This can be particularly helpful in times of crisis like we're in now. This is a completely new situation, and we really have to depend on the people in our team and ourselves to sense these tensions, the needs of our team, in order to be able to navigate this ongoing uncertainty. So now that you have an introduction to tensions, let's take a look at why we frame our agenda items as tensions. So we use the power of tensions because it really reframes that complaining or negative feedback as important information for the team to use rather than waste. It utilizes our collaboratively designed, utilizing our collaborative design meeting practice along with tensions means that you can show up to any meeting ready to facilitate, knowing that you'll do a good job, especially in times like this, where we need each other's perspectives and we need each other's sensing in order to figure out how to move forward. It's a powerful and human-centered practice that efficiently invites all team members to bring forward whatever's on their mind with respect to their team, from celebrations of work well done and any kind of demands, any kind of issues that are on their minds, from things that aren't working to priorities that need to be revisited. It also builds and kind of demands engagement from everyone as we get on the same page. So these are not conference calls that people can simply stay on mute the whole time. And it creates a strong pathway for organizational responsiveness because everyone in the organization has been empowered to see what's needed and has a place to come where they can do something concrete about it. All right, a little bit more on tensions. I'm sure you're wondering, what are tensions in a team context, team meeting context? Tensions are whatever is on your mind with respect to your team. And as we've mentioned, these can range from things you're really excited about, like a new idea for a product or a service, to things that are dire and urgent, like we all have to work remotely. How are we going to learn that set of skills while we're navigating a real life crisis? It's a lot. And so to build our agenda in meetings, we use our living agenda, which we'll share a template for via email after the webinar, as a shared visual reference. This is also editable by all, and we can record upon this, our tensions, as agenda items one at a time. Each tension should be introduced in 10 seconds or less and have a single tension holder, usually the person who brings up the item. On the agenda, this looks like a few words summarizing the tension, followed by a hyphen and the tension holder's initials or first name. We recommend that a facilitator invites a round to surface any tensions and a scribe to record those on the living agenda. A round is where each participant is invited to speak in turn, and it's particularly helpful in online environments because it's harder to read social cues and see who has not participated. And once a team has some practice with this, team members can add their tensions to the agenda ahead of the meeting. So again, we'll share what we call this living agenda template for meetings in our follow-up email with you. But once we've built the agenda from everyone's input, the facilitator is going to choose an item and will invite the tension holder to give any more detail needed to introduce their item.
So
let's...
What are some examples of this, right? I want to jump in with some concrete examples, right? So one team member, Rebecca, might name attention around ensuring that the team would be able to keep work moving forward in an emergency. So an agenda item titled Emergency Preparedness Plan in the case of COVID-19-RFM could be put on the agenda. Another example, another team member might mention that during their turn, with the move to online work, they want to discuss ways to create some online content that serves their community. So an agenda item might go up, creating online content -XZ. Or example 3, a team member might mention that they know that finances have been hard over the winter and they want to make sure the team feels financially supported to get what they need and stock up on extra supplies. And that might look like COVID-19 extra financial support -GG. So these are some examples of just how the kind of the brief summary of attention is encapsulated just in its title and put up on the agenda so that everyone can know what's ahead of them.
And the next question is, what do we do with these? How do we process these tensions? How do we compost these into food and movement forward for the organization efficiently and effectively? And in our certification program, we teach students what to listen for and how to facilitate these tensions to both be centered on what the individual needs in order to make some progress on resolving a tension, as well as how to be efficient. You won't learn all of the ins and outs today, but you can review the 3 Ps with us. And so these are the different kinds of output that we might create from agenda items, as you can see on the screen. So depending on what the tension holder needs from their tension, the output will change and the process for how to get to that output will change. I'll walk through the first example. So we're going to take the emergency preparedness plan in the case of COVID-19-RFM. As the facilitator, you would start by asking Rebecca, the person whose tension this is, to introduce it for the team in greater detail. At this time, Rebecca's tension was around ensuring that the team would be able to keep the work moving forward in case of an emergency. And perhaps Rebecca came to that meeting with a plan for what's expected from each member of their team to document their work so that it can be picked up by someone else in case they need to take a leave of absence. So Rebecca would present a proposal for a new shared agreement that the team could make. Then the facilitator would guide the team through a collective decision-making process to ensure that this is a safe step for the team to try. We use integrative consent as that collective decision-making process, a process that we do go into detail in our course. And fast forward, and the output of the agenda item could look like this. A proposal where all team members are going to document their upcoming projects and ongoing recurring tasks anticipated for the next 2 months so that another person on the team could pick up the work as needed. So creating solutions together can be super quick with practice and with clear tools that help you know how to navigate attention quickly.
Awesome, thanks. So there's lots of great questions. Thank you everyone for those. And I am going to just put up the whiteboard for you because we're gonna practice this for a moment, just a quick moment of surfacing our own tensions that we might bring to a team. And so if you can think of something, take a few seconds, think of what would a tension that you would bring to a past meeting, maybe that you did bring to a future meeting, and go ahead and write it up on this whiteboard using the same things that you did before. So going to view settings and then annotate. You may have to wiggle your mouse around, explore. And thanks for that input about our sound. We'll see if we can fix that on the back end here. But go ahead and put in your tension here. Meeting's too long, great. Managing information overload and information that is constantly changing. What to do in an economy where 10 million plus people suddenly have limited or no funds. I'm gonna add one here too.
Yeah, who's gonna apply for that emergency loan? That's a good one. And unclear priorities, absolutely. What do we need to focus on right now? Because the entire playing field has shifted.
People who not being able or willing to look at the big picture, what's best for the group? That's a good question. How do we have a workable rate structure? And it might be a question of like an opportunity. So like how do we support our community is a tension that you could bring to your team in this moment. Awesome. So keep thinking about how you might, what tensions you might bring to your team and how to do that. So I'm gonna trade the screens again.
Great. So it looks like a lot of you are getting the hang of it. I know it's a lot of information. So I want to reiterate some of the overarching tips to share with your team as you try this out. So first of all, think about any tensions as items we put on the agenda. Remember, this can be anything from good to bad to neutral. It's really just the gap between where we are and where we want to be. When the facilitator chooses our item to process, it helps a lot if the participant is ready to introduce it and ready to identify which kind of output would help move that tension forward. We can also support our team by being willing to share any ideas that would either move another person's tension forward, or we can help by being concise and not repeating ourselves or other people, using clear as possible, not overindulging our desire for attention, and being attentive to the needs of the whole team and to any needs we have for ourselves and our roles.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. So to summarize that, your next action or something for you to consider is to try reframing your meetings with tensions to get at the heart of the matter and source your agenda from your team to align on the work together. And it also allows you to tap into the needs of your team. Those people on your team really know what's needed more than anybody could know. And it builds engagement across space to ask people to do this, to bring their tensions and to know that they will be heard, that there is a process. So it's a really powerful reframe put into practice. So, and I've been putting your questions at the end, so please do know that we will get to them. These are really rich. So I'm going to pass it back to Cecile to talk about our third last-ish tip.
Nice. Yeah, so the third thing we wanted to share was this idea of how to get alignment. How do we reset our priorities? And it really gets at the reality that as external circumstances change, we need to be able to respond. In the time of COVID-19, it's not only highly challenging for team members to focus on the work at hand, but it's also inevitable that our strategies must adapt to address this crisis, both internally and externally. Many of our clients are finding that they must shift their priorities, including making time to put communication structures and processes in place so that they can navigate virtual work environments effectively. So this is the time to connect and reflect on your priorities with your team on what is needed for the next 3 months or so. Even in non-crisis mode, having a clear strategy. So when we use the term strategy, we're talking about what are we going to focus on? What are our priorities for now? And sorry for that delay. So yes, having a clear strategy can make a big difference for any team at any time, either remote or in person. But for a self-managed and remote team, being clear on your short-term strategies, in other words, what your top priorities are, is essential in order to being able to set aside the noise and focus on what's important. And to frankly being able to make hard choices, because often setting our priorities means there's something that we're not going to do. And being able to make those decisions clearly and collectively has a much better response rate in terms of actually playing those priorities out. So in our leadership program, we teach a simple practice for facilitating virtual strategy conversations in order to help teams pivot in rapidly changing conditions. And today we're going to offer a really quick and dirty version of this that you can use when the unexpected happens. So step one for this is that you or another of your teammates would put new strategy needed as attention on your agenda. When this agenda item is selected, you would have the attention holder introduce this attention behind this item. And then we're going to step into brainstorming. So step 2 is brainstorming. And here are some questions to help get the brainstorming going. The question is, what has really worked about our previous initiatives? What do we really need in this moment? What does our community need from us in this moment? What initiatives would help us leverage our strengths? What initiatives would help us maximize our opportunities? What does our intended business model require from us as initiatives? And as a little scribing tip, it's really nice if you can have an excited and fast note taker who's willing to jot down these notes while people are brainstorming, and invite everyone on the team to crowdsource those possibilities. So step number 3 is theming. And this is inviting participants to identify themes from all of the brainstormed ideas that you've had. We're trying to cluster those ideas. We're trying to put them in little groups together and see what's the central theme that emerges from those clusters of possibilities. And this can help you pinpoint what's at the heart of what your team needs to focus on now. The goal is that we want to narrow this down to 3 to 5 different initiatives. For the time being, again, we might be just looking at the next several months. Once you have those, it's really helpful to brainstorm some metrics. So this is step number 4. And when I say metrics, I mean, how are you going to know if you're on track with your initiative? What is it that you want to pay attention to? What measurable changes would indicate that we're moving in the right direction? And these don't have to be beautiful. They just have to be clear. And step number 5, lastly, we invite you to create a strategic metaphor. The beauty of this is it's really humanizing. We think in pictures and stories as a species, and being able to take these initiatives and say, yes, it's a lot and it's intense right now, but let's coalesce all this in a metaphor that we can sort of hold in our heart and hold in our minds easily for what are we focusing on. And to do this, invite your team members to share several words or phrases that might capture the emerging strategic metaphor. A few examples might be planting the seeds, or tending to the body, building the house, ready for takeoff. The sky's the limit. But my experience is that every team comes up with some really useful and very salient metaphor for their current strategy that's useful. So now that you have the basic building blocks of a new strategy identified, you want to guide the group through the final steps to make a shared decision together. So you're going to have, when you're done with the steps I just mentioned, you're going to have a list of initiatives, you'll have some metrics, you'll have a metaphor. That constitutes a proposal that you can then take the rest of the way through a shared decision-making process. And as you move into that, it's helpful to spend a moment reflecting with your team in silence. Invite them to reflect on their experience of the process so far of generating those strategic ideas. And you can ask some questions to sort of seed the silence. Questions like, what's missing from what's been shared so far? What initiatives can we not afford to leave out? What are the most energizing initiatives that this organization could consider? And from there, we consolidate the verbiage for the metaphor, initiatives, metrics into a clear format, and we finalize the process using a collective decision-making process like integrative consent.
That's great. I just really want to note some of the particular features of this process: the metrics, the metaphor, and giving people the opportunity to reflect. Metrics is really important. It's making sure that we're not just being pie in the sky, and we can hold ourselves accountable. We can measure where we're going and are we getting there. And this metaphor is a psychological tool that can convey a host of information really quickly and be a really great reminder, just for orientation. Like even as I'm deciding what to do in my workday, if I have the strategic metaphor of my team in mind, I kind of know how to prioritize much better. And reflection slows the process down enough for important ideas to emerge, which is so key in moments when we're making a quick change. And just to tie this back to the somatic practices at the beginning, this reflection is a great time to like pause and take a moment with our bodies, and then to turn our attention to the question at hand, the particular strategic, package at hand, and come to that from a really grounded place.
Wonderful. So yes, in our training, we go over how to make collective decisions like this together through integrative consent, and how it fits into other important needs in collaborative project management and accountability, whether you're working remotely or in person. These initiatives really become our collective priorities or our goals, to which our top projects and next actions can be aligned on a daily basis. Being able to integrate ways to collectively track operational details and share project management are also key practices to stay in sync, especially when working remotely. Having an effective collaborative accountability system will increase your productivity while reducing stress and overwhelm as you align around your work priorities and appreciate the work that's been accomplished. And this is especially important in stressful times and when working remotely. Otherwise, our team can be pulled in several directions, and that leads to burnout and resentment. So in order to get really good work as an organization and achieve great things, we need to have good accountability for what we choose to work on, what results we're getting. So that's why we included this as a key module in our program.
Nice. Thanks, Cecile. And so I'll just summarize that pretty quickly. So when things are stressful for your team, and when things are changing like they are right now, but really in any moment that's changing, when your priorities need to shift, it's really important to turn to your team to sense what's needed and how to be responsive to the moment. And so try out this practice, give yourself some spaciousness for it, and some patience, because you'll all be trying this thing new. And can consider getting the more comprehensive process, the whole agenda with us. If you have questions, it's really can really feel safe to process these things if you know what to expect. And so this process is really important. And I will stop there with that. So with that, I want to share a big picture view of the takeaways from today in our work. So we've mentioned this a few times, but we've talked about this course so much because we've designed this comprehensive picture to support key remote collaboration tools that can help you and your organizations be responsive and agile in the face of crisis, whether that's internal, external, minor, or major. And so a next step for you is to consider how you might bring these aspects into your leadership to increase your ability to facilitate responsiveness that's not only dependent on one person, on you, but dependent on the team. So if you're curious to learn more about the course as a possible next step, like I said, applications are due next Thursday on April 9th. And to continue the conversations, this is a great space to do that. So I've listed out the tips that you can see on the screen here. So just to give us a full picture, because we went over a lot in just an hour here. So the first one is commit to a somatic practice. Start regularly checking in with your body. Maybe put it on your calendar every day at the same time, and utilize this for yourself and your team when you're feeling stuck, or to get present, or maybe when the team is feeling anxious, when you can feel that energy in the Zoom room. And number two is to reframe your meetings with tensions, to get at the heart of the matter and source your agendas from what's really present in the team to align on the work and build engagement in that way. And then the third one is to revise your strategy. Even if it's quick and not perfect, it doesn't have to fit your 5-year plan step by step. It needs to be really clear on what's a priority in the moment. Otherwise, it's not going to hit home for people on your team. And it's important to be responsive and agile in the midst of big changes. So that's the main takeaways. And I just want to talk a little bit more about how to integrate these things to the fullest. And it often takes time to put these into practice. Like I mentioned earlier, giving yourself some space to try these things out is really important. And we've also designed this course to meet over 10 weeks. It's not just like a weekend thing, because we know that these practices take time to really settle and integrate in ourselves. And we learn things over time, kind of spirally in lots of ways. So it's helpful to see it now and then try it again later and then try it again. And so we've created this course over 10 weeks with lots of interaction and tangible projects to build up to that understanding. And in just a few hours each week, we see people really feel some serious shifts in their leadership and in their way and how they facilitate their team. And so I encourage you to take that spaciousness and think about how you can go deeper and about the type of leadership you want to tend to in this new normal. I don't think we should go back to business as usual. We should really inhabit what it takes to have a new normal. And with that, we have a practice of clarifying outputs. I've put on the screen here some of the tools that we focus in on the course that you can maybe look up on our website or ask me about more. But we want to know from you what do you want to remember from these conversations? What is your next action for yourself, your next step? So it makes the most sense right now for you to reflect for yourself for a few minutes, but I'm going to pass it to Daniel to give you a prompt for this.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so we want to give you just a little solo time to reflect and identify what you want to work on to make the next few months easier for yourself and for your team. Well, reflect on what stood out for you from the framework that we've offered today and other tips that you would add. And really, to make it really concrete, what's one next action for yourself that you want to take away from this call? What's one thing that you want to put into action in some way in your life or with your team? This could be a specific goal you have, a growth area, a recurring issue you want to resolve in your work environment, attention you want to bring to your team. Just take the next minute to think about where you think the biggest growth potential is for yourself, and then we're going to share that together. So just, you can also jot down any questions you have or that have come out of this presentation today. So we'll just take a minute or so in silence for that. Okay, great. If you've all had a moment to get something down, of course you can continue later, but let's bring it back together. And I think the next step is, Rebecca, we're going to have folks put that in the chat box.
Yeah. Yes, okay. I think that's a great idea.
Yes. If you have some things, you can jot your next action or your key question into the chat for folks to reflect on.
People everyone can kind of learn each other in this moment of like what they're taking away, like, oh, actually that's what I'm taking away. Yeah, I see that right. So please do share it if you're willing. And while you do that, we are going to today, we have a good time here to get into these questions that people have asked. And let's have a few what other questions you might have, and then we'll start. It looks like I'm having a big moment myself.
It seems like you're back, Rebecca. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, right. So there are some questions around how to bring this to your team. I think there's a lot of anxiety in the air, which makes sense, and in ourselves. And so people are worried that's going to overwhelm the meeting. So there's questions like, or comments like a colleague's anxiety is overwhelming the meeting. And how do I make sure, I fear that one person would take up most of the space with their particular tensions. What are your suggestions for handling that? Those seem like similar questions in some ways. So I'd love to pass it to either of you who feel energized to answer that, how you would work with that.
I'm happy to jump in initially, but yeah, so in terms of introducing these ideas to a team, I suggest you introduce them as an experiment, something that you've learned that can really help align remote teams and get more efficiency and effectiveness, and to just try it as an experiment and let folks see for themselves what the benefit is. In terms of colleagues' tensions overwhelming a meeting and the question of one person sort of dominating the agenda, those are really important considerations. And one of the tools that we have in our standard meeting practice that we didn't have time to introduce today is the idea of voting on agenda items. So once we have built the agenda, we then invite the team to vote on which agenda items are perhaps necessary for today, which ones might be short, which ones we might like to get to today. And those collective votes help to distribute the energy across all of the tensions that are up there. Typically, one person doesn't get all the agenda items when we use that voting process, which can be a really helpful tool to distribute the power across the team. And for colleagues who are really struggling with anxiety, I definitely recommend using some somatic grounding practices at the beginning of the meeting. And as you feel their anxiety beginning to overwhelm the meeting, bring it back to that. Just be, okay, let's just take a minute. I'm going to set my timer. I just want us to breathe. And that usually helps sort of break a cycle of things that are getting wound up. Yeah, is there anything either of you would add?
I wanted to say too, like sometimes, this, just the invitation perhaps to get your tensions out there might be the place where someone just has a lot to say or something like that. And so I think there's a couple things there, really empowering the facilitator to facilitate and to hold people to a format in a way. Again, you have to have agreement that this is what you want as a group. So again, kind of proposed, Cecile said, hey, let's try this experiment. Everyone's willing to try this experiment. Let me facilitate for today. Give me the authority to cut people off and to redirect and to actually facilitate. And let's see how it goes. And then when you're doing that, keep people to that format that Cecile mentioned of just a title for the tension and a short description. So, and do a round, where everyone gets a chance to speak, and just, maybe even do a round where each person can only surface one tension at a time, and then go around a few times if you need to, or something like that, to get, enough things on the table for now. Yeah, so those are some further thoughts.
That's great. Those are great responses to that. Feel free to questions. Feel free to put them in the chat box. And it looks, can you hear me okay? Yeah, kind of.
A lot of times we can, but then it breaks up occasionally.
Okay, maybe I hit my limit, my Zoom limit. I'll keep trying, but I may pass it on if it continues. So the next question that kind of goes on with that is, this relies on a level of comfort with all team members being able to speak up about the tension they may be feeling, i.e. Psychological safety on the team. Do you have any suggestions for ensuring this is the case?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I started on that.
Yeah.
Super critical and that does take time to build. That might not be the case in every environment. So, I mean, we talk a lot about, in this webinar we talk a lot about in our training about power, frankly, and about who has the power to make decisions now, and how do you shift that to a more, egalitarian way of operating. And it's important for people to feel safe. They need to feel that there's not going to be repercussions, in a sense, for speaking up, and so that's important to make that clear. And if there is an existing, in a sense, power structure, if there's a boss or a manager or something like that, they need to be the one to set the example of making it really clear that the input is welcome, and that we're shifting towards really including everyone's voice. And that may take practice, that may take time, but it's safe to try. We're gonna all agree that it's safe to try, and it may be messy a bit, but that certainly helps a lot. Cecilia, what would you add to that?
I really love the idea that it's the person who may be holding the most power on the team that should model the safety first. And that can help folks get there. But as Daniel said, if we're starting with a toxic situation where it's not safe to speak up, that's going to take some time, and it needs to start with the people in power actively inviting that, and then showing through the practice that they're hearing from someone that maybe they wouldn't have tolerated in the past, but they're hearing that tension, and then it's getting processed through to an output that's moving things forward. And doing that over and over again will help sort of calm the nervous system of the team and allow that tension surfacing capacity to blossom.
Yeah, that's reminding me of another thing too, is that we also suggest that teams don't have their leader be the facilitator, that you pick someone else on your team, not the founder, not, if you're a co-op, the founder or people who've been there for a while, but pick someone who has less positional power to facilitate through the meetings, because the facilitator does have a good amount of power that we're consenting to give them. And it can kind of maybe even create that space more safe in that way, I imagine, possibly. Not 100% positively, but possibly. Great. So there's some other questions here. There's one, this process seems to suggest not having draft agendas set up in advance. Is this your suggestion?
I can jump in on that. Not necessarily. I recommend that teams get in a practice of adding their tensions to the agenda whenever that occurs to them. So it's usually in between meetings. So by the time we get to the meeting, might have an already populated agenda. But it's useful to, before you start just digging in and processing, to see if there's anything else that's emerged at the last minute, especially at times like this where things are changing so rapidly. What we thought might have been important last week might not be important this week anymore. And so that's why the in the moment surfacing any further tensions, and then the voting process is really key to get that collective intelligence.
Some teams, some teams that work in government and things like that have to abide by open meetings laws and things like that, where agendas do have to be published in advance, and that's fine. In that case, you could hold the agenda open until a set date, and then the person who is what we would call them the scribe, or the secretary, they would put together the agenda and send it out so that it complies with transparency laws and things like that.
Great, nice. Great responses there. There's so many questions. I'm trying to make them flow in the right way, so my brain is turning. There is a question here about how do I avoid tensions becoming overwhelmingly negative?
I can jump in on that. The primary mechanism is that we're asking people to name their tensions in a very short introduction, right? 10 seconds. And then when we get into processing it, we're not allowing them to just keep spiraling down into more and more fear and negativity, but we're moving immediately into what is going to help move this concretely forward. And that concrete movement forward usually is a huge balm to the anxiety that we're feeling or the negativity that we're feeling about any given particular issue. So really practicing that metabolizing those tensions into positive solutions can prevent that sort of overwhelming negativity.
And again, the somatic practices are super helpful. Again, if we're helping our team stay kind of grounded and, you know, have their feet on the ground throughout the meeting, then they're sensing what's true for them, and that they have something that they need to bring forward, but they're hopefully not being overwhelmed by it themselves necessarily, because we're encouraging everyone to just keep rediscovering their resourceful place. Doesn't always happen, of course. Life is messy, but we can vastly improve that possibility.
And I want to just add that it's okay if tensions are becoming negative. That's really, like we said earlier, that tensions are food, and negativity can be really fueling for what needs to happen, what changes we need. So it's uncomfortable, but it could be a really good source of what needs to change in your team. So I want to encourage you to lean into that, and lean into that person who's bringing it up, or the group of people, to find out how to make that change. Because over time it can become toxic. That could be really important. And we have time just for a couple more questions here. So a quick one, possibly, is someone had asked, what does consent mean in your context here?
That's a great question. Yeah, so consent means that we have agreed to a proposal on the basis of not seeing it being safe to try. So consent means we think that this thing is safe to try. And another way of putting that is that it's not going to cause harm for the team to put this in action and give it a try. We might change it next week. We might make a different decision. So we're using a very agile model that paired with the idea that consent is based on this idea of not causing harm.
Nice. Great. And then there's a question here about what do you do if you feel like your team won't support you in the practice of these new tools?
Well, there are obviously situations when that's the case. And if you have little positional power currently, it can be hard. What I have found helps is to identify where the pain points are for a team, like what's not working about a team's current communication processes, and then offer these tools as a solution to those problems and to try them as an experiment. And from there, you get to see whether your team thinks it's worth trying or not. But I do encourage you to lean into the discomfort involved in presenting something new for the team, especially during this time when so much is in chaos. I think there is more opening for novel and creative ways of relating to be valued, or at least be willing for folks to consider doing and employing together in an effort to be more efficient and effective.
Do you want to add anything to that, Daniel?
Yeah, I was just trying to formulate my thoughts. I feel like there's also a value in learning these tools, even just for oneself, even if one's team isn't very receptive, consciously in a sense. But the way that learning these facilitation techniques and these process tools helps to, I find myself, for instance, in many circumstances, whether it's just in a conversation with someone or in a meeting where I'm just a total newcomer to the group or something, I'm still like, reframing things and asking questions and kind of participating in a very new way based on having these tools at my disposal that can make a difference. And it's a little bit painful sometimes to do it that way, to kind of from behind the scenes in a sense, but I feel like it still is leading to better results. And so if I'm dedicated to showing up somewhere because it's important for me to be there for whatever reason, whether it's just so I can keep my job or whether it's to make a difference on this committee that I really feel strongly about their mission, I can still show up and offer something more nuanced and more capacious although I'll probably also be frustrated at the same time with the lack of better adoption of new ways. Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. That hour and 15 minutes went pretty quick. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces at once, and we're gonna close the meeting for now.
We could put it on. You can put it on gallery view if on the upper right instead of speaker view, and see more people's faces.
Then you can see everybody.
And if you're willing to
go ahead.
on video, if you're willing to go on video for the last moments, then we can all see and say hi and wave at each other. It usually feels good.
And feel free to open your mic to say bye if you'd like, or any last moments.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Really appreciate your attention and your good work out there in this crazy time.
Indeed. Hang in there, folks, and take care.
Thanks for sharing all your ideas and experience. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being present with us.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.